work session meeting. It's Monday, March 14th, 2022. Mrs. Bond, if you will lead us in the pledge.
Yes, Madam President. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Our first item on the workshop agenda is Mr. Hardesty, Cabell Middle, Huntington High, I guess renovation overview and Meadows design overview.
Good evening, Madam President, board
Good
members,
evening.
Dr. Sachs, Ms. Hornbuckle. It is my pleasure to be able to bring to you a couple more bond projects that we've been working on. And at this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Ferguson, Dave Ferguson from ZMM. He has been working on the designs for both of the renovations, the one at each high school, as well as the lead architect for the Meadows project. And so he's going to have a presentation for you on where we're at with that process. And I thank you very much.
We should have something on the screen here in just a second, where you'll be able to see it on the screen as well as the handout.
How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Sun's out, so we're good.
That's good.
Snow's over, hope.
Thank goodness.
Did I not read it?
Thank you.
Here we go. Session.
Okay, we'll get the first one. Okay, the first, we'll talk about three projects this evening, Cabell Midland High School, Huntington High School, and the new Meadows School. First on the list, the renovations at Cabell Midland High School. We're doing a new safe school entrance at both the main school entrance and the activity entrance by the gymnasiums. We also are going to do 4 renovated restrooms and the entrance facade revisions and updates. Do you want to wait on Mr. Sachs to come back, or
Has he already seen
keep
this?
going? He has. Okay. And then we're going to do an alternate for security renovations to the courtyard, so we can enclose the courtyard and have pass cards to go in and out, so the students can come and go through the courtyard without feeling anybody else can come in from the outside. So we'll secure that. But we're going to make that an alternate. You want to go to the next? Some of the facade renovations that we talked about doing was, you can see there on the slideshow as well as up on the screen. The lighting, the backlighting to the letters, what we're going to do is that's RGB lighting, so that can change for the seasons. You can change, it can become a multitude of colors. We're going to, as well as change the lighting and add the Cabell Midland High School lettering, we're going to wrap the columns in a little different color, different material, so that it updates the entrance a little bit. We'll also be changing the color of the trim around the main entrance and the activity entrance.
I love that one.
Y'all have any questions about that?
Oh, I think it's beautiful. I've always said that Cabell Midland High School is written so very tiny on the side of this humongous building.
Yeah.
It looks like it's 12-point font.
You'll be able to see it now.
I love it. This is a much needed.
The lighting, I mean, it's red, but it can be any color you want.
Yeah.
Is it my
Gray.
eyesight? Because it's
No,
like
it's
12.
small.
Is it? It's small.
I love that.
This is beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Plus, you'll have the safe school entrances behind that, so it kind of blends into the architecture that's going to be there. The next slide is the restroom renovations. We talked about individual restrooms for men and women in the main activity entrance, as well as we'll take out that ticket booth that's in the activity entrance in the center, give you more space around those hallways. And the doors, right now we're talking about taking the doors down to the floor and adding a glass from the corridor to that restroom space. It's not exactly see-through, it's just an opaque looking frosted type glass. Any questions about the restrooms?
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes, sir.
Will they be vape monitors in?
Yes, we'll have, since they're individual restroom, each individual restroom will have a vape monitor in every restroom as well.
Okay. And you talked about the glass, that's gonna be a safety type
Yes.
glass?
Yes, sir.
Shatterproof, something like that?
Yes. It's more of a plastic than a glass.
Okay, thank you.
How do we know when a restroom is occupied? Now, I mean, I like for privacy that it goes to the floor, but if you're gonna skip, that's where a lot of kids go.
We can do that a couple of different ways. We can put, as the door shuts, we can put a light outside the door, or we could put a vacant or non-vacant lock on the door as you latch it shut. Or we can have the door open, like like an open, like closer type thing, to where you have to close the door if you're in there. If not, it can stay ajar.
Something to help our teachers and things know, oh, there's somebody in there.
Correct.
Or, that you don't want anything going on.
Yeah, and, board members, one of the things that is unique about this restroom design, and this is sort of what we challenged our architect to take a look at, is that there's more and more situations that are arising where, students that identify with the opposite sex would, having restroom preference, without violating any other student's rights. And that's what this accomplishes. They still have a communal sink basin area, but they would have individual stalls so that they're not infringing on either student's rights. And so I think this is a really important concept. And I have to also say, want to commend Mr. Hardesty and Mr. Ferguson, because they have worked very, very closely with the school administration to make sure that they understand what's going on here. And they've had input into this as well. For both locations. I think the location you're looking at right now is the athletic entrance at Midland.
That's correct.
But they had input on it's probably a more significant change is the one near the cafeteria. But being able to look at how that one would be done as well. But both of those would have the inclusiveness along with the privacy as well. They're still designated men's and women's, but it's easier for us to be able to accommodate a student
Respect.
and wants that individuality in their decision of where they go.
I really like what you mentioned, that maybe the door could possibly just be open, and then when a student entered, they would have to shut it. That would be an immediate indicator if the stall was free or not. I love that idea, and it respects everyone's privacy. So,
Will there be locks on those doors, sir?
There always is a latch there where it's a
Inside.
privacy latch, correct. And you can get in an emergency. If it stays latched all day, somebody should be monitoring that. You could get in at some point if you need to.
The area where the sinks are is now more of a common area. And so you would, theoretically, you could even have a camera on that area for incidences or those things, because they're not in the restroom areas. It's just where they wash their hands. That's more of a communal area. That glass doesn't even have to be there, we think it's probably, for at least Cabell Midland in their conversation, it would provide a little bit more of a buffer. But if that glass wasn't there, and I think that we had a conversation with Huntington High about that, they sort of see things differently. They would like to not have the glass there because they feel like they would be able to more easily supervise the students when they're in the common area of being able to wash their hands. But we'll get to that when we get there. But I just wanted to clarify that they like the aesthetics at Midland of having that sort of fogged glass look. You can still sort of see in there to see if there's someone standing there or loitering, those types of things. So that helps, I think, from a supervision standpoint as well. But
We
because
did-
it is common area, you would be able to have surveillance areas there where they're washing their hands.
We designed it in such a way where the glass can be removed if you choose to do that later on down the road. But for right now, we thought it was just prudent to put the glass up to make sure it ease people into the thought process of this whole thing.
may I? Is this a mirror on the side? Is that what a
We're,
mirror? is that a mirror that I'm seeing in the image?
No,
think it's
you,
on-
s-
I
that,
think
that's
it's on the
the,
very
that's
far
the
end.
glass.
Well, no,
Talking
like
about
on
here?
the end, yes.
On the end of the
Yeah,
restrooms, there'll
because you
be
gotta check
full-length mirrors.
Your outfit before you go back. I mean,
There'll be-
everybody wants to do that, boy or girl.
Well,
you
there's
know?
always mirrors that's required in the restroom, but they're on the
Okay.
ends, so they're not above the sinks like
Okay.
you see them now.
No, that's, as long as we've got some in there.
You'll have some.
And I
Yeah.
think Dr. Sachs alluded to it, but the women's and the men's are separated some way?
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is just the women's section.
Sure.
The men's section will look just the same, except it would say men.
It's just a different area.
Yeah, it's.
It's right beside it.
Right
Okay.
beside.
It's exactly the same, just right beside it.
Gotcha.
Actually, I think what separates them is actually the concession stand
Mhm.
at
It is at
Midland.
Midland.
Yeah.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good, thank you.
Huntington High School, moving on to Huntington High, basically we have similar things, the new safe school entrance,
Oh, my goodness.
at both activity and the main entrance, entrance facade revisions and updates. We have 4 renovated restrooms for the base bid, the courtyard, and then additional, there seems to be more renovated restrooms required at Huntington High for some reason. They were more abundant. And the courtyard renovation, both would be an alternate.
Can you stop at they're looking at the cover, the front entrance here?
Yeah,
This is gorgeous.
Oh, you're there, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
we can go
apologize.
back.
Nope,
This is
I
so
apologize.
gorgeous.
Light on that.
I love it.
Yeah, we put the green light for Huntington High, but that, like the other, it could be anything. It can change with the seasons, you can have all different kinds of colors.
Oh, awesome.
So here, we figured out a way to put the HHS in front of Huntington High to give it a little more of an update similar to Cabell Midland, and it will be backlit at night. And then we put we thought about putting a shield on that big piece. I thought that was
That's
nice too.
top
Your
notch.
lighting, will it be computerized?
Yes. Yeah, it's RGB lighting, and it varies and you can do all kinds of things. with it.
Anytime we want to.
Yes.
Okay, sir.
This is gonna instill pride in our schools. This is absolutely beautiful.
Now, before you go on to the bathrooms, can you
Okay.
talk about that entrance and what we're gonna have to do for their safe school entrance?
Oh, we're going to,
Because it's a little bit different than what we're doing at Midland, and so I just.
yeah, it's a lot different, actually, at the main entrance. We're having to create a space. If you recall, there's an open stairs. You walk in on the right. We're building, if you look at to the right of the shield, we're going to have to create a new entrance into the building and create additional office space there to create that safe school entrance. But at the activity entrance is very similar to Cabell Midland. But the main entrance is going to require a little bit more effort.
It's gonna be part of the current music department,
No, it's not that, no,
not going that far.
it's not going that far.
This is the main entrance where they call it the corral? No, they call it
Oh, the
Didn't know
student
that.
center's here.
where the main office is. That's the student center,
Yeah,
yes.
the student center.
So they're gonna, there's a hallway that's already there
Yeah.
or in a classroom, I think.
There's a hallway and a classroom, but wasn't being used very much, so we're taking part of that classroom and the hallway and creating that safe school entrance there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm confused. How is that gonna tie in with their main office? Because you walk in and the main office like sits farther back. How are we gonna tie into that?
It's not going to tie directly to that. What we'll
Okay.
have is a couple people there that are, that will check people in and out, and that's
Okay.
that will be their duties to
will
do
be-
that.
Okay.
It'll be basically a new little mini office suite just for safe entry to the
And
building.
they'll be trained in, okay.
There was no way really,
Yeah.
in order to we couldn't displace the childcare center,
Right.
and we couldn't displace the whole office somewhere else. We didn't have enough room, so we had to split it up a little bit
Okay.
to make it work. But it will become a true safe school entrance with secure entrance and everything.
Now, also to address Ms. Smalley's question, at the athletic entrance for the school, how are we, where,
There's another hallway there.
yes.
That's not being used very much, so we're accommodating with that hallway and rearranging that office space to go through that and we're not infringing on the music department at all. And they still have their correct exiting and that sort of thing, so we're good there.
All right, thank you.
The restrooms are very similar. You have the large restrooms at the athletic entrance and around the main entrance that are very similar. There's just seems to be more of them at Huntington High than there does at Cabell Midland. That's why we're doing alternates for the additional ones. And it's exactly the same type of glass, same type of similar floor tile, same arrangement as before. Any questions on that? Okay, moving on to Meadows, I've got a couple different things I'm going to show you. This is the floor plan. It's sitting on the site, and you're going to have another site plan come up in a few minutes. I'll explain. It didn't get, all this information didn't get put on this site plan, but this is the site plan as it shows. We have the activity on the left of the building, all the classrooms on the right-hand side of the building. We have a main entrance in the middle of the building to the school, and we have a athletic entrance with, or activity entrance, I should say, with commons, dining, or multipurpose room, and deliveries on the left. And you'll see some outside play areas located on this. But Jed, if you want to go to the next slide, please. You'll have a larger site plan that shows, since we have a large site at Meadows, they are asking for some things that'll have to be down the road. They won't come out of this bond necessarily because we don't have that much money.
Mr. You have thrown them for a loop because the picture there doesn't match what's in their packet.
I know, it's
So
not in the
can you
packet, and
explain
I
it?
apologize for that.
Can you back it up and explain what you've shown them?
It didn't get put in the packet. You have this drawing right here,
We do.
okay? On the next site that you'll see on the TV,
That.
They were all like,
okay?
they kept looking through their packet.
I'm
they're
sorry,
like,
I'm
"Where is
sorry,
that?"
I apologize for that. This didn't get put in the,
Property is what I wanted to.
yes, that's the extent of the property. Jed, can you go back?
Go back and slide.
There you,
Nope, one
no,
more.
next one.
The one in the middle.
That
You're
one.
playing with them,
Okay,
Jed.
leave it there for just a second. Okay, that shows all the additional site that we have to provide other amenities that the committee brought up. And I wanted to show you that the SBA will not pay for all these things. So this is your SBA project. So down the road, we want to think about adding those they'd like to think about adding those fields, outdoor play areas, outdoor classrooms, all the things that they could have on that site up there.
And of course, and board members, what we've talked about is that, even this evening, Huntington East has talked about their athletic field, but this would be an ideal location to have a shared field for Huntington East and Huntington Middle School, as well as having, Meadows have it as a play surface and such. But it could be a football, soccer type field. And then, of course, you'll have to have parking and shelters and those sort of things. Correct me if I'm wrong, obviously SBA dollars and part of the bond did not go to specifically that portion of this project. It's more of like an additional option that we could entertain in the future. But what we can do is during the site excavation can go ahead and take care of this area during the initial phase. Is that correct?
Right. We can grade, what we would typically do here is grade the site to accommodate all the things that we'd want in the future, just like we did at the Milton project. We want to grade all that out, supply underground electric, stub up underground electric, and make sure we have certain things in certain areas. And the next time you see this, I'll probably show where we could probably have bleachers as well. So if it becomes a football field at some point in time in the future, we want to be able to accommodate and design in where everything goes, so down the road you can just pick apart things and do them. Any questions on that?
Mr. Ferguson,
Yes, sir.
will the high-tension electric
We can't do it with the
lines in there
with the
interfere
current
with
money we have with Meadows.
technology?
We would need to allocate.
It shouldn't. We have schools in other counties that are closer than you are to high tension electric. That has no problems at all.
Okay.
But we'll be able to do the site work. Start with.
Have you core drilled out there the second time, sir?
No, sir, we have not. We wanted to wait to place the building to put all of our core drilling out there so we know exactly what we have where our building goes. And we look to do that actually within the next few weeks, get that started, because we have a plan now that the committee hasn't signed off on, but it's close, and we'd like to get that started.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Madam President,
Ms. Vaughn?
may I? This is beautiful. How I wish we could have all of that. I want it all. It's absolutely gorgeous. I want to try to get as much out of that beautiful piece of property as we can. Oh, how I wish, if I had the money, I would do it. It's just, it's gorgeous. I love how you have it laid out. It's perfect. I just want it all.
I think,
Yeah.
I think we'll be able to achieve it. It just may not be when the school opens up.
Right.
That's the big thing, so.
I'm glad that at least we can prepare.
I think
for
you need to
those.
prepare
It's a
for it,
plan.
plan for it, and I think once you plan for something like that, you can, identify funding later on, even if it's a little bit at a time.
Yeah, agreed.
And the last slide there is just, the next slide would be just the floor plan and classrooms that are required and the arrangement of things. Now, it doesn't dive into location of furniture at this point, but next time you see this, we'll probably have everything laid out within the next couple of weeks. So,
One last question. All of your utilities, like the electric and stuff like, that's gonna be underground?
yes, sir.
Not overhead anywhere?
No. No, well, we'd like to have underground electric and everything to the building and get rid of all the overhead lines. And we have that ability since everything comes up to the top of the hill there. So we should,
Is there any plans for emergency generator?
we discussed it. It's just to depend on whether we want to put the whole school on it or just do the kitchen equipment and food and that sort of thing. It's in discussions at this point.
Emergency lighting and
Mhm.
stuff like that?
Oh, you have to have emergency lighting, but,
And, I mean, with that generator?
mhm.
Okay, but I think since you have natural gas out there, you get a gas generator
Mhm.
and supply the building partial until you get everything done in.
Yeah, if we could do a partial, it wouldn't be as expensive as doing the whole school, so that would be good.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Mrs.
I've got
Bond?
one. Help point out storage for me on the slide that we're looking at here, like for music and art. I see some storage for pre-K and like a flex that looks like a,
Well, what you don't see, in between music and art, there are generally 2 rooms, and we don't show that in that detail down this phase, but you'll
Okay.
see 2 rooms at a minimum of 200 square feet each that go between those 2 rooms, that sort of deaden the sound between the music and art.
okay.
So between music and art, there'll be 2 rooms.
And that would allow for storage?
Yes.
For those, okay.
Yes. It's not shown here. It's showed in the box where it says music and art, but it's not detailed out as to how
Okay.
those smaller rooms.
Okay,
But there will be music and art storage,
excellent.
as well as casework in the music and art rooms.
While we have you here today, Mr. Ferguson, one of the things that, I'll say that board members, Mr. Hardesty probably talks with Mr. Ferguson every day. Just about.
At least.
And then he probably talks with Ms. Randolph at least every day or every other day. We haven't gotten as far on Milton, obviously, with that architect, but one of the things that has come about as a common theme among the times that we do meet with Mr. Ferguson, especially for our construction meetings that we've had for demolition at the Sears building, which is just, I'm in awe of the immensity of space that's there. But is a deep concern that you all do need to know about, and that is inflation. And so here in a second, I'd like to ask Mr. Ferguson to just highlight what he knows based upon recent bids that have been coming in and projects that have been budgeted. But board, I want to remind you that what we've asked the voters for as it relates to these bond projects is $87.5 million worth of funding, coupled with $10 million a commitment from the school district's general budget and $10 million from the school building authority. So that gives us a grand total of $107.5 million to complete these projects. There was a benefit to when we passed the bond and when we sold the bonds, because we got a really great interest rate, but we also got a premium, and that premium was $4.5 million. So that $4.5 million can also be applied to these projects. So we have somewhere right around $111 million that we have to be able to make all of these projects cross the finish line. And really, there's when it comes to additional funding beyond that, it's not identified. So, and of course, you all also know that the situation that we're in with declining enrollment and the fact that in about 2 years, we'll lose COVID-19 funds, and we'll have to take a serious look at staffing. Being able to, at this time, allocate additional general fund dollars to these bond projects is very limited, because we have to be able to also sustain the district once the pandemic funding is up. And of course, I'll also say, and I'm not trying to paint a picture of doom and gloom here, I feel like you need to know all the things that I know. We've had probably 40 requests for Hope Scholarship, which is the scholarship that's at home that the legislature passed, which is funding that basically if they're a public school student and they decide to go to either homeschooling or to private schooling, that the money follows those students now. And so that's money that we would end up losing. We've had about, like I said, about somewhere between 30 and 40 applications over the past week and a half. So those are all things that I feel like you all need to know about. And the reason I bring that up is that the inflation costs for some of these projects is very concerning. So I'm going to ask Mr. Ferguson to just talk about anecdotally some of the projects that he's seen, and then I'd like to add some additional information and then ask the board for any questions they may have. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try to be positive about this. It's a very serious concern. I will say that. In 2018, we planned on a 4% inflation cost escalation on several projects, and that is up to 14% as of the 1st of February. And in the past couple of weeks, it has grown even more with what's happening overseas with gas and gasoline and all that, fuel. Some of the bids we're receiving lately on projects have been, instead of construction costs being $250 a square foot, some have been close to $400. And that's for what we would normally put out for a typical SBA project. It's not anything special. A lot of the problems come with contractors not being able to get bids from subcontractors. Sometimes we bid a project the other day, the low bid contractor could not get more than one bid from any subcontractor. A lot of his materials were not guaranteed for more than 24 hours after his bid. Subcontractors won't hold their price to the general contractors that are bidding. Material suppliers won't hold their price for more than a day or two after he bids, or the contractor bids. So the contractor is at great risk when he bids, so he's going to add money to his bid to take care of that risk. That's how it works. Contractors won't hold their prices for more than 30 days generally when they bid now. Usually it used to be 45 to 60 days. And that's, again, it puts him at risk. So the more we ask him to hold, longer we ask him to hold his bids at bid time, the more money he adds to his project. And it's only to cover himself because he cannot get materials. Steel, as we've heard for the past year, has been really hard to get. Bar joists, rebar, those kind of things. Steel beams and columns are generally 10 weeks, 12 weeks out. And now they're even longer than that. Electrical panels is a great thing. They're 50 weeks to get an electrical panel. We opened up a project in Corridor G about 2 weeks ago, had the grand opening, and they had to go rent from A1 Rental a electrical panel to open the building, turn the lights on, because they still haven't got their electrical panel and the building's been built. So we can't, it's hard, it's difficult to get wood doors. You know that as well as anybody, as with your little project here down the hall. The wood doors in the window were weeks and weeks to come in. And 7 months?
7 months.
So those are the kind of issues the contractors are running into, so they pass that along on their price. I would like to think it's going to come down. We estimated it would probably start to come down late summer, but with the gas and stuff, with the gas prices that are escalating, I don't see that that's going to be it's probably going to be slower than it is faster to come down.
Can you give them an example? You don't have to say the school's name, but I think that really, to put this in perspective, this is the one thing, board members, that keeps me up at night a little bit, but there was a project, was it a K-8?
It was a K-12 building that we bid, and
It's like 2 weeks ago.
it's like 2 weeks ago. That's correct. It was 108,000 square feet. It was an existing building. It was I can't remember the exact square footage, but we added on to it at a large amount. So total is 108,000 square feet. The bids came in at $430 a square foot.
The
And
total
total
project budget
project was
what?
$430, and if you take out the renovation piece, it was probably more like $700.
Can you give them like dollar amount, like how many millions, like 35 million?
It was $46 million was the low bid.
But how much did they plan on?
Originally we planned on 28 or 29, and then we kept escalating it during design, and it ended up being, we thought we were going to get it at 37, and it came in at 46.
So when we heard this, I talked to Drew and I'm like, let's add this up. It's like a 37% cost increase over the budget. And if you apply that 37% logic to our bond projects, that's another $40 million. And we don't have that. And my other concern is that, if we start with Davis Creek and Meadows, and then we have obviously Nichols and Height Saunders, which are quickly going out to bid here. We have the high schools that we just talked about today. We have the Career Center, which is like a $40 million project, which could, that could be 20 million over for all we know at this point. We could very quickly not be able to build a school if we're not careful. So Mr. Hardesty is not the favorite guy all the time, because he is riding these architects like no tomorrow. He's making sure that the contractors that we're already under contract with are adhering to the contracts that we have. But as we have taken a look at our site plans, there is no room for us to go over the SBA formula for these projects. And so, and Ms. Bond, you had a perfect question about the closets, and that's in code that we have to have those closets. But a closet or storage is sometimes a request that when they get down with those with teachers and say, what do you want? What do you need? Well, that adds extra square footage, and extra square footage, obviously if instead of, $300 a square foot, you're talking $700 a square foot, that's a big difference when you're talking about just 200 square feet, for example. I say that because we've already had to go back to Davis Creek, because Davis Creek was being over-designed. It was over square footage. And the staff has been really, really good to work with Ms. Randolph, making concessions, thinking how we can do different makeups in the building to make sure that we're within the square footage allotment, and not, I think the thing is we want to be careful to not overpromise and underdeliver. We want to be able to underpromise and overdeliver. That's really what we want to be able to accomplish here. Because at the end of the day, we have made a commitment to the taxpayers that we're going to do all these projects, and we need to make sure that we can do it with the money that we have. And if we design a building to SBA funds and it goes over, then we'll have to figure out how to either value engineer, go with a different type of product perhaps, or we may have to look at how can we, look at our budget in order to make the project work. But I think we have to be very careful that we don't overpromise items on these projects because of where inflation is right now. It's very, very concerning to me that if we're not careful, we'll get to a point where we're not going to have the money to finish a project, and I want to make sure we can do that.
One of the things I also want to say is it's just not like larger projects. We're doing a lot of ESSER money projects, a lot of HVAC projects, and those are consistently, in certain areas of the state, 40 to 50% more than the budget allows. And it's taxing all of the HVAC contractors out there, because all of a sudden your subs are few and far between, because they've got their own projects. They've got a new HVAC replacement over here and over there in Mercer County, Raleigh County, Fayette County, Cabell County, Putnam. They're everywhere. And it's across the country. So all those HVAC, and that's why the HVAC equipment is in high demand. And there are always long lead items because you've got the whole country bringing their schools up to code with that work and that money. And ESSER money is Davis-Bacon wages. And once that contractor's on site, all the other contractors have to bring their wages up to Davis-Bacon wages, which is a 20 to 25% increase in your project cost.
And that's when you're using the ESSERF dollars.
That's when you're using the
Yeah,
ESSER
and
money.
that's, and so, board members, our ESSERF and American Rescue Plan dollars, I don't mean to put him on the spot, but how many HVAC projects were we looking at funding with that?
We're looking at 3 full projects and a controls for one. So we'd like to do a couple more, it just really depends on whether or not the funding's there.
Do you remember the schools, the 3 schools?
It's actually blended into Height Saunders and Nichols. We're doing the controls at Salt Rock, and
So
we're
all-
looking at Cox Landing, but I don't think we're gonna have the funding for it.
Yeah. And so that was, in order to be able to, again, the concern was is with Height Saunders and Nichols is that to be able to do everything that we had said we would do in the bond, we also realized that we could use American Rescue Plan dollars to offset that cost so that we weren't overspending bond dollars to get those projects done. So that was just one strategy we're trying to do to make sure that we're keeping all the projects under control.
Madam President? May I? I guess what's important to me is being very open and honest with Cabell County.
Mhm.
We are all feeling inflation. My grocery bill has doubled per week. I think all families are feeling that. I think what's important is that we communicate that to the taxpayers of Cabell County, that this is what we're facing.
Mhm.
And I appreciate you trying to be very positive. I just want to be very honest with everyone. We want our kids, we want to give them all that we can, but with circumstances being as they are, we may not be able to do those extra things that we would love to give them, and that's just being a parent. I mean, in general, we always want to give our kids lots of things, but sometimes we can't afford that. So I think the most important thing is to communicate to Cabell County what we're facing when we're looking at trying to get these bids, to let the community know where we are. I think that's what's important.
Yeah, and I think that one of the strategies is also when there's those wish list items. I'll give you an example, like at Davis Creek, having, for example, sort of like we did at Highline, the turf area, that those become alternates.
Yeah.
So, because we can't promise it, but we'll put it in there because if bids come in lower, then, and I'm not saying, I'm using turf as an example, I don't know that that's what they exactly wanted. I think I'd heard it mentioned, but wherever it may be, is that we use those as alternatives. And in fact, if you recall, even with Nichols and Height Saunders, there were already alternatives in there, some of those restroom areas.
Yeah.
So that's one of the strategies also is that we don't want to dismiss some of those wish lists. We want to put them in there as a contingency if there's money left over to take care of them. But it is something I think that we're going to have to be very mindful of. And I have charged Mr. Hardesty to keep these projects within budget, at least in the planning stage. He can't control what happens when the bids happen, but he can control how they're designed, and he can control to make sure that the architects haven't over-designed these facilities to where we have bids that come in and we're $10, $15 million over, and it's very, very difficult to value engineer that. You're pretty much starting from scratch when you go to
Right.
redo that.
Mr. Ferguson,
Yes, sir.
from the time you put a shovel in the ground to finish the building, it's usually what, 14 months, 14 months, sir?
Elementary schools are usually 14 months, depending on the size. They're usually 14 to 16 months. Middle schools are around 16 months. High schools are a little bit
That's
longer,
if you can get the material,
if you can get the material.
because you could wind up going over two years on these buildings,
Every bit of
and
it.
that cost keeps escalating.
We bid a roof replacement with a new HVAC system in a county back in October of 2021. And they said immediately, we can't start till April because they still don't have their materials.
And you said about electrical control panels.
50
and
weeks.
AC units. If you do not get those, that
Shoot.
Price keeps going up.
Mr. Parsons, we haven't been able to get, how many, 4 vehicles?
Well,
I mean, it's the truth. It's just unbelievable. I mean,
I
we're
go
not on
to the
vehicles.
grocery store, there's nothing on the shelf. A pound of ground chuck is $10.73.
That's why you should go to the county fair and buy a beef.
Get you a steer.
But that's what I'm saying. Our budget, I think you started with 108 million. I think that was the total for starting.
Yeah, well, you mean for the bonds?
Yeah, it was 108 million.
107.
All added to get 98 plus 10.
We're right around 111 with the bond premium,
Okay.
yes, sir.
But I do not believe with our, I'm gonna be honest with you. Coming down the line, I do not believe we were gonna have the funds to do what we really need to do.
Well, that is a fear,
I mean,
and
you
so,
can look at it out here now.
yeah. No, I mean, that's why we wanted to be able to have this conversation with you all, because, you know, there's gonna be things that we can ooh and awe over when the designs come in, and, you know, we wanna be able to, and I think that part of it is planning for being able to do them at some point, but the most important thing is gonna be able to get these buildings, you know, built. And really, it also, I mean, it sort of, it goes with some of our other projects too, though. I mean, that's the other thing, important part of this, is that some of the other projects that we want to be able to do across the district, we may need to be very conservative in what we choose to do and what we choose not to do right now, because those dollars may need to go toward these bond projects in order to get the bond projects over the finish line. That's me just being real. You know, I think that we're going to continue to try to be competitive with school building authority funds and those sort of things, but you know, I think that being able to just really prioritize the bond projects first as much as possible, so that we can dedicate all of our resources to making sure that those projects get off the ground. Now, there's going to be essential things that we have to do for upkeep of buildings, roofs, those types of things, floors. I know that Mr. Hardesty's, you know, we're already starting the budget process for next year. You know, he's trying to tackle some preventative maintenance type things, some flooring type, you know, improvements and those types of situations. We're looking at that performance contract to be able to perhaps even finance some of our projects out. You know, so I think that all of those, it's not one thing that we can do that will solve this problem. I think it's a multitude of things. And what we will try to do every step of the way is to be transparent with you all. And I think that even to some extent, we have to figure out, actually it's not to some extent, we need to make sure that we're able to effectively communicate with the public transparency as well. Because we want to be able to get all these projects done with the funds that we have available. And, you know, in order to, I don't want to have to go back to the voters and say, hey, we need more money. That's what I'm trying to prevent.
Will these
So,
buildings receive new furniture? and
those are
that?
all, yeah, those are in the square footage
That's in the-
costs.
That's
in the
correct.
contract.
That's
Yeah.
correct. All the budgets for each school, each project, have new furniture in that budget.
Okay, and the technology center, the equipment, we could put out for a Carl Perkins grant.
So
That grant
that-
usually provides for the equipment for the technology center.
well, we get annual funding for Carl Perkins that we use to update our machinery. One of the things that Mr. Flowers, his department, you know, we have on staff a marketing person who is responsible for marketing and grants. So one of the ideas that we have for the Career Center is actually different divisions of the Career Center. So for example, healthcare. Healthcare prep programs would have a sponsor that would sponsor the healthcare wing. And part of that sponsorship is sort of naming rights of those healthcare program labs. So that, let's say it's ABC Healthcare. I'm going to just call it ABC Healthcare. ABC Healthcare is a very prominent healthcare provider in the area, and they want to sponsor this because it's important to them to get a dedicated workforce out of the Career Center, out of the nursing programs. So they're going to sponsor some of the lab equipment.
Like Mountain West, like that?
Well, I'm not wanting to put a name out there quite yet,
I mean,
but you know,
the thing of it is,
right.
you have to
So,
think about it.
right, yeah, so.
You can't wait till the time comes.
Oh, we're not, but we're trying to be strategic. But, you know, automotive, you know, we have automotive providers, we have car dealers, we have body shops, we have, you know, there's all sorts of different private businesses out there that are philanthropic. Just look at our university and what they get. So what we're trying to do is that because this mall property is such a gem, it's got a lot of appeal. Everybody really kind of wants their name attached to it. We want to be able to provide that, but in the way of helping us fund the equipment in this new facility as well. So that's one of our ideas that we're looking
That
at.
machine shop equipment is 19 and 58. I
Yes.
used some of that when I was down here in the lower section.
Yep.
58, I mean,
And it would probably cost us $500,000 to replace it all.
you can't replace it for that.
You probably can't, you're right. Mr. Ferguson, we could have.
Came in down
Right.
there.
You have some pieces of equipment down there that are $250,000 pieces of equipment that those kids have to be trained on. So, but anyway, but that's part of our strategy. And so, like I said, I think it's a multifaceted strategy, but I can tell you that we won't be able to do it without your all's support and being able to, make sure that we are accountable to these project budgets and that we're not overcommitting ourselves, so.
That's our goal.
Didn't mean to make you scared because it's an exciting time, but we also just have to be mindful of the dollars and where we are as an economy.
We don't want to hear any gloom and doom.
I hope not.
I'd rather have an ounce of prevention than at the end, and then at the end than have to be really gloomy,
64
so.
hours of prevention.
I don't
Reminds us of
know.
our responsibility.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd rather have an ugly truth than a pretty lie any day. I'll take the ugly truth always over a pretty lie, at any time. Because I just want to be honest. We need our needs met, and that means sometimes we don't get those wants because we can't afford them. And that's okay. That doesn't mean it's still not gonna be a great school because the needs will be met. Let's do what
Right,
we
you
have
have
to
need, with what I always say when I talk to the staff on each school that we're working on, you have needs and you have wants, and you have to that meet code.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's first.
There you go.
And then you go through your budget and make sure you can get what you need to deliver, and anything else is extra.
That's right.
And I've been pretty honest with the staff at all the schools that we talk to, and I'm pretty good about saying no, so.
Well, sometimes you need to. Sometimes no is the appropriate response.
And I will
Yeah.
say, it's been a hard thing for me to be able to wrap my brain around too, because, when one of my biggest pet peeves coming into this was when you have elementary schools that are built and there's no playground. But playgrounds aren't in the budget, they're not in the general budget, it's an extra.
It's an extra.
And we were able to accomplish that with Hylon. In fact, that was one of the things I've been saying to these schools is that we're in a different situation than what we were with Hylon. Hylon was the only project. Hylon, we, had matching money. I mean, it's pretty amazing what we got Hylon for our commitment of about $7 million, because SBA kicked in dollars. But, the district actually ended up having to kick in some additional money to be able to get the whole thing done the way they wanted it. And we're just not in that situation right now where we can always kick in an extra million or two to get those projects over the line. I mean, honestly, it may be that we have to out of necessity, but it means that we can't do some other projects that we probably want to do, so. But I will tell you that Drew is a phenomenal treasurer. He is unfortunately the biggest worrywart, and he is, and rightfully so, but you'll say, hey, Drew, let's think about this, and I always sort of laugh because I can tell he's thinking, that's gonna cost more money, Mr. Sachs, we shouldn't do that. But he's a realist, but he also is a planner, and so I know that we've been really blessed to be able to have him, that he's been able to plan for some of the things we've been able to get accomplished. This is one of those things that's gonna be really, really difficult to plan for just because of the magnitude of what inflation is right now. And so I just think we have to take all that into consideration.
Anything else?
Any other questions for?
Thank you.
Goodness, that's plenty to chew on.
Thank you.
Something to worry about.
I got something-
So,
Something else to worry
I
about.
have something for them all.
so now what we get to talk about is staffing plans.
Well, I do want to say that he was talking about Drew and planning, and one of the things that I appreciate working with him because he does plan. And one of the things our department's doing, and I'm meeting with him next week to review all of it, but we've been working on our budget for next year. And while we have the LSIC requests and things, and we need to get through and prioritize those and try to put a dollar amount as best we can on those, as you notice, we still have 3 high schools that have not been here yet. And so I've emailed each of those principals to see, just try to get a heads up of what they're looking for on their LSIC. So maybe we can do some prioritization and planning on that, because that's something I'm gonna need prior to them coming and giving that. So, and I work closely with all 3 of them, so I don't anticipate there being an issue there. But one of the things I'm gonna have to instill in our department is, as we go forward in the next year, and honestly the next couple, possibly 3, until we get these projects complete, is that as people come to you and want things, they're gonna have to go through the proper channels to make sure that we get those on a budgeted list and prioritize those. So sometimes they come with a want, and I just don't want us to end up giving a want and not being able to supply a need, and that's something that's just worrisome. However, I'm gonna not look at that future on this part, and we're gonna talk about our staffing plans for next year. And one of the things and the theme that has been consistent through all of the LSIC so far is that they really like the interventionists they have, the support staff they have in their schools, and they hope that carries forward. And I wanna thank you all for already saying that we're not gonna have any reduction in forces this year, because what that has done for our department is to be able to focus on what the needs are that we know of, without having to worry about how do you shift people around when it's just a guess. However, we do have some changes that we know will take place. For example, in food service, we already know what schools are serving a particular number of meals. We know where we might be overstaffed a little bit and where we need other staff. But the great thing about that is we can move that staff around during this time of the year for next year without that impacting a full-time employee to where they're not gonna have a job, because that's not gonna take place, which is a great thing. But we do have a little bit of movement, and that's based on need. In service, we have, and just to give you a little bit of background, in service personnel, when we identify a need or someone that we can move due to staffing, and maybe they're not needed at one school but another, we can't just move them there. There's no provision for that in state code, because you can never bump into a vacancy. But let's say we have an extra cook at, I don't have a school listed here, this is just an example, a high school. So we identify the least senior person in the high school in that roster, we give them a transfer letter. We have to find a position in the county. If you're on transfer, you're guaranteed a job for next year. And so we have to find, usually on a normal year, we find the least senior cook in the county and give them a RIF letter. And then we post that job, and anyone can bid on it, because we now know we have a spot for that person on transfer. This year, though, saying that we're not gonna have any reductions in force, we know that we're not gonna have the need of all that movement, but we can identify that vacancy through maybe a retirement. We hold that retirement, we post that retirement, the cook can bid on the retirement. And so we don't have to find that vacancy, because we're not moving that many people. So in service this year, we have a total of 19 bus operators on transfer. And I know that sounds like a lot. That really is generated due to last year's redistricting that we did. Because that was done after personnel season, so we couldn't just move the bus drivers around. And so what Mr. Meadows needs to do is place them on transfer, and he's working on establishing those routes so we can get those jobs. Many of them will get their same route back with just a little bit of change to it. The others may have to bid on a job, to bid on a route once it's established. Because we've had to, I don't know if you all may not even be aware of this, but at the beginning of the year, we had to shift some things around and some bus routes around to try to accommodate all of the students. And so anytime we do a schedule change for service personnel, that's supposed to be done at the beginning of the school year, which doesn't mean August, it means July 1. And so this is the time of year that we need to do that. It's personnel season. So, and again, they're all being placed on transfer. So we're not reducing any of those bus drivers at all. We just have to get the routes correct. We have 1 ECAT, 1 aide, and 2 cooks. So that's a total of 23 employees and service personnel that will receive a transfer. And in professional, we have bumping that takes place. And so the way that works is if you're a math teacher at a middle school and we need to eliminate a math position, which we're not, but if we have a need that we know we don't need one, in another school, we can't bump that person into that opening because you can't bump to a vacancy. So what we do is we find the least senior math person that matches that person's certification. We pull them out of their job and move the most senior person into it. And then we would place that person either on RIF or transfer. And most likely for a math person, we put them on transfer, knowing we'll need them somewhere. We just wouldn't be able to identify it yet. We have another, professional personnel has another portion for elementary regular classroom teachers. And it's not everyone in an elementary school, it's only for regular classroom teachers. But it's called the Anaconda Role, because if you think of a snake and they eat something that moves down the line. So if you have a big kindergarten class, that teacher goes to the first grade. In theory, that's what it's supposed to do. But there's nothing in code that says a 5th grade teacher can't go to 2nd grade if that's where the need is. And so while we have we have actually 10 different identified areas in professional personnel in their elementary of where we can do without a professional staff member. 6 of those are actually taking place because of that rule where they can go to somewhere else in the building where we know there's a need. And so they're not even, 6 of those 10 aren't leaving the building. One of them is actually moving into another one. Again, they bumped the least senior. And so 3 of them are going to be bumping out of their building somewhere else. So out of the 13 people getting a transfer, at the end of the day, we'll place all of them back but 3 at a meeting in May. It'll be the first meeting in May. And those 3 people will be able to bid on jobs as they're posted. Because right now we're building the list of needed known vacancies for next year. And it's almost hit 60 at this point that will be posted in May. So,
But those 3 people, even though they won't, once the transfers occur, they're not gonna have a place to land immediately until they bid.
Correct.
They're still guaranteed a job with the district
Absolutely.
next year.
Okay.
So they're not out of a job, they just have to bid on something in order to be placed.
and we know of already almost 60 positions that we're going to have to post. So, and we do that because the way code is written, any known vacancy that we know about, and that's one of the reasons why the cutoff for retirement and the extra bonus if you're going to retire is March 1. Any known vacancy by March 1, we have to hold that till next year. We can't post it in the spring or whenever that might be. If they're going to work through the end of the year, we post that in 1 lump posting. And so those 3 people on transfer that will end up on a transfer, we can't hire somebody from outside until they get a job in their certification area. So they're good. We do have 6 positions that we need to eliminate, and they are extracurricular, they're not regular positions. So, and it's because of what we did last year with some of the federal money where we hired full-time employees, but we were past personnel season, so we couldn't eliminate them last year as an extracurricular contract.
Jason, can you check what's going on out there? Thank you.
That's a lot to absorb, a lot to take in because of the all the different nuances between things. So, but does anyone have any questions?
Well, how do we go about that? Can you explain that a little bit more, these extracurricular? How do we eliminate, because that's just in addition to their actual job, correct?
Correct. So if
we're
you're
okay
a
to eliminate them.
if you're a middle school English teacher and you are really good at, you could be anything at the, so for example, a SysOp, you might have an extracurricular contract where you're the SysOp in the building. But if we've hired a full-time person to take that role, we really wouldn't need those services, but we can only eliminate a position during personnel season.
Okay.
Once that time has passed, and we have to identify those jobs and have it voted on by the board on or before May 1st.
Okay.
And when you go back, you have to identify it much earlier than that because you have to give them notice. They can request a hearing if they choose to. And so we go through that process and we deliver all of our transfer letters and things like that in March.
Okay.
That way they can have a hearing in April if they choose
Plenty
to
of time.
and give you an opportunity to vote on that prior to May 1st.
Okay.
We didn't get that last year because we didn't hire them until after the May 1st cutoff, so. That's a lot. I'll be glad to answer any questions, or if you come up with one later, just let me know. It's like a
Anybody
big
have any
puzzle that you have to
questions
kind
for
of put
Mr. Hardesty?
together.
I'll get you tomorrow.
I'm anxious to hear about the bus routes, because just like every other employee, bus drivers bid to try to get the route that they want for whatever reason it may be, whatever the reason is valid. You know, they try to get certain runs, maybe it goes by something that they need to do, or it's close to home, so I'm
Right.
looking forward to getting those. Hopefully, we can meet student needs and not disrupt our drivers too much. 'Cause
And it
we
wouldn't
need
surprise
them.
me at all if many of these, it's a conversation with the driver. We would let you keep the same route, but we need to add this street or these 3 streets in this area
Oh,
onto your
see, that'd be
route.
great.
And they say, sure, and they sign off on it, and and then if that happens, they won't even hit the board agenda in April. But even if they do, as soon as that were to finish, then we would just place them back in there.
Okay.
We can rescind jobs all the way up until, till the stay put date comes around in late July. We can rescind those and put them back.
Okay, fair enough.
Anything else? Thank you,
All right,
Mr.
thank you
Hardesty.
very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Mr. Rodkin. Mr. Rodkin?
Good evening, board members. I do expect this will be brief. I know you all have been here quite a while between the state of the schools and then our presentations this evening, so this one should be pretty quick. But what I was going to go over with you are the property taxes. We got our updated property values from the assessor last week. And so we have a special board meeting. Just want to remind everybody, there's a special board meeting tomorrow at 4:20. And that's to adopt these proposed levy rates. It'll be just a real quick meeting, up or down vote, and then we recess the meeting. We don't adjourn, we just recess it. But just so that way you have a little bit of information tonight as we get ready for that meeting tomorrow. One thing, Mr. Hardesty, for passing out these packets. You can see there's 7 pages, and trust me, we'll go through it real quick. The first page, I just wanted to be able to show you that the property taxes make up about 1/3 of the money that comes in. So, you know, whenever we're watching what taxes are doing or what the property values are doing in the county, it's important stuff because, you know, 1/3 of your budget is dependent on how healthy the economy is here in Cabell County. So that's about 1/3, like I said, it's about 1/3. Pages 2 through 4 are the actual document that I'm going to ask you to approve tomorrow night. And then we'll have Dr. Sachs sign those after the board meeting so that we can send it off to the State Department and to the State Auditor's Office. They have to go and check my math. And once they've done that, they'll send me a letter back saying, hopefully everything's good. And then you'll see the same schedule in April. And that's when it kind of becomes final and the levy is actually placed on the taxpayers. There's a lot of information here, so what I tried to do was summarize that for you all on pages 5 and 6. So if you'll turn with me to page 5. This shows you the first column there is the levy rates from last school year, or this current school year. It could be last spring, but that's the year that we're in right now. And then the proposed levy rates, this is what I'm proposing that we need in order to operate our system next year. The general current expense, that's mandated by state law. I can't change that. You can't change that. The excess levy was voted on by our voters, so again, I can't change that. You guys can't really change it either. The permanent improvement fund, that's something we just do every year. That's you know, for roof replacement, for blacktop resurfacing, that kind of stuff. And then the bond, and of course, that is also regulated by the bond call that we just had adopted. But I will notice to you that it is almost, not quite, a 4% decrease in the tax rates. And that's because the property values grew just a little bit, just enough to be able to reduce the rate by 3.7%. So I don't know that that's, let's all jump up for joy. We're going to save all kinds of money on our taxes, but it's, it is a reduction. So that's still.
Too bad we can't call for that.
That's the direction we like to see it go, I think.
That might actually help us a little bit.
So I think we like to see it go in that direction.
Sure.
It's not, it's not going to cut your tax bill in half or anything, but it is a reduction from this year. And page 6, that's on the back of that page. This shows you for each one of those levies, because the property values grew, there is an increase in each one of those levies, the amount of money that'll be coming into the county. That first line, the general current expense, be an increase of $745,000. Most of that we won't really see because that gets factored into the state aid formula. So very little of that, just a sliver. It's like 5% of it we'll get to keep. The rest, we really won't get a whole lot of immediate benefit from. The excess levy we will, and that is showing an increase of about $1.1 million in revenue. Here in a minute, I want to show you page 7. Some of that doesn't really stay with us, and so I'm going to explain that in a moment. But the excess levy, that will help us. Now, you just heard Mr. Ferguson talk about inflation, and it's obviously going to affect the bond projects. I think we're also going to see that's going to affect our general operating budget too. A lot of our costs, things are going up, not just for everybody at the grocery store, but the district itself. When we buy supplies, those are going to cost more. Mr. Meadows sent me an email the other day, and the price that he was paying for diesel fuel, I think we're between 25 and 30% more than where we were just about 6 weeks ago. And remember, because he's buying in bulk, he's getting really good prices on the diesel fuel. He's not getting it it's not like us pulling up to the gas station and we happen to be at the most expensive one. He's putting bids out there and getting the most competitive price that he can. And, literally in 6 weeks' time, his costs have gone up.
Since you brought up the diesel fuel, I noticed in accounts payable, the check for $40,861. Are you going to increase his budget for diesel fuel?
We'll likely have to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's up 27%.
Yeah, right. We're likely going to have to do that, especially for next school year. I did look at, just for curiosity's sake, where we stand this year. I think we're in good shape because I think we were trying to think ahead. We kind of expected the prices to go up a little bit, so we did budget pretty conservatively for this year. But for next year, I would expect probably a fairly significant increase in that budget line.
The trucker filled up his tanks, was $12,000.
Yeah.
That's it tells you what kind of shape we're in. So that's probably, so even though there is what I'm trying to get at is, with the excess levy, there is an increase. I think we're going to end up seeing that inflation is going to eat at that. I don't know that that's going to be a lot of money we're going to get to pocket or redirect. It'll be, I think, costs that are going to come up. And one thing I was going to save this for tomorrow, but I was going to go ahead and just, because this is kind of on topic about the amount of money that things are going to cost. At the last board meeting where I spoke, I was asked, how much is it going to cost the county for this state-funded raise? And for the general fund only, it's about $420,000. $420,000 for the raise that the legislature just appropriated to the state.
Yeah, and if you don't care, I'd like to be able to explain that. But for the raise that the state's giving is only for 200-day
Years.
employees. Well, 200 days out of an employee's contract, basically, for what's at the allocated formula for how many employees we can have. Well, we're well, you all recall, we're well over our formula.
What about
by-
87 or something over in there?
Well, that's probably only service.
We're right about 100 on service. I think we're about 67 on professional.
On professional. So, so all of those additional increases would come from our general fund. Anybody that's over 200 days, their daily rate obviously is impacted, because their 200-day daily rate increases, but they're on 261. So that's where this, when I say we're gonna have to, just because the legislature passes it, doesn't mean that it's a wash. We have to foot the rest of the bill, and so it's an additional, $400 and some odd thousand. Now, there's always the option to not do it, but I'm not gonna suggest that. I think we should, but it's a commitment that the board needs to be understanding that does impact the budget. So while he's showing that there's the potential for a increase in excess levy funds, it's very quickly eaten away just from even the pay raise bill.
201 to 261, we make the difference at.
Yes.
Yes.
On everything,
Yeah.
service and professional.
Okay.
That's correct.
So, so that's about 420,000, and I'll just go ahead and throw this out there, that we went ahead and also analyzed it. What if we looked at all funding sources? Because right now we are so heavily dependent on those COVID stimulus funds, the ESSER funds. So including, all the pay raises we would have to give to Title I staff and special ed staff that are funded through federal grants, as well as our custodians in ESSER and other positions. It's actually district-wide, it's about $940,000 to be able to give this pay raise to the existing workforce that we have. So that's kind of all in. So it just tells you, when the state gives a raise, we're obviously really happy about it, especially as employees. I'm an employee, I'm happy to see that, but there is a cost to the district, and they're not going to paint it as an unfunded mandate or an unfunded cost, because they're viewing it as, well, there is a formula, and you can either choose or choose not to stay within the formula. But the formula but where we do stand with the formula, it's about $420,000 to the general fund, about $940,000 overall. And so that's why when I say that the levy looks like it may generate another 1.1 million next year, you're going to lose an awful lot of it in the pay raise. And then combine that with inflation, you may find that even though your levy is going to bring in some additional money, you may be pretty much right where you were. I don't know that you're going to be in a little better shape.
Well, Friday on the news, I mentioned this to Mr. Smalley. The government may not fund our pandemic lunch programs.
They're reducing the rate.
Yes.
That's
They
already done.
may not even fund it.
Well, we'll still qualify for community eligibility option, which we'll still do, but we've been operating where the reimbursement rate was much higher, and that rate has been extinguished. So we'll go back to the pre-pandemic reimbursement rate.
We'll have the funds to carry on the lunch program.
It's prioritized in the upcoming budget, yes,
Okay.
yeah. We have not had any discussion of eliminating that.
That's what they brought on the news and a couple senators.
Well, but Cabell was very unique because we were one of the very few counties in the state that were already doing community eligibility option where we were feeding everybody. Since the pandemic hit, every county jumped on board because the reimbursement rate was so high. Not all those counties are gonna be able to do it after the rate goes back down. We still will be prioritizing those funds in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's any plans in making any changes right now there. If there's no questions, we'll move on to page 7. That's the last one that I have for you all. And
Which
that's-
one is page 7, Drew?
That's the very last page.
Oh, I see.
It's on the
Thank you.
inside
Yep.
cover. So page 7, this is something I think usually I give you every year whenever we get to this meeting. That first column that goes all the way down to the bottom that says net increase or decrease, You'll see that $1.1 million, 1,114,000. That's the total amount of the projected increase in the excess levy. And the way that we've done things historically in Cabell County is we allow our partners to participate equally in that increase based on the rates and their proportionate share, if you will. And so the library would see an increase of about $68,000. The park board would see about $21,000. And so the amount that Cabell County gets to keep of the 1.1 is $1,025,651.
So, and I feel compelled to explain to or to reiterate with the board. So the excess levy from the funding source next year, of the projected budget funding coming in next year, 1.644 million will go to the library and 508 goes to the park board. And Drew, tell me if I'm wrong. We've always operated where we've shared that increase with them, but is that in statute that we have to?
At this time, I don't believe so. Now, they have sent formal requests to us asking that we maintain that level of funding, but I don't know that that would be a statutory requirement at this time.
And the reason you don't think it's a statutory requirement is because the statutory requirement to fund libraries out of your excess levy ended back in like 2012 or
You're
something.
right, it changed several years ago.
And board, if you recall, I would be happy because I think it's important for you to have this context. But if you recall back when this occurred, Kanawha County decided to stop funding their public library out of their excess levy. And there was some rigmarole about it, obviously, but what the library then did is they went out after their own bond. So, and I'm not I know it probably sounds like I'm advocating one way or the other. I just want to make sure you all are well informed that some of these entities have other revenue-making things that they can take if they really wanted to go out and do the work instead of riding on the school district's coattails, for lack of a better way to put it, to get their funding. So I just wanted to share that with you because that's, and here's the other thing, is Wayne County does not provide anything to the park board. And the park board is a Cabell Wayne park board. So that's another beef that I have, but. So.
Do you all have any other questions for me this evening?
Okay, are there any questions, other questions, or anything for Drew? Hearing none, Drew, thank you for a nice report. Are there any comments that the board wants to make at this time? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move for adjournment.
Mr. Shaw moves.
Second?
Mrs. Bond seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
We gotta come back tomorrow.